Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Reverend Paula Skiles with Unity Church of San Marcos. And I'm asking you a question this morning. Have you ever wondered why we even have a Bible? Okay. Have you ever thought about how can stories over 2,000-year-old really relate to something for us today? I mean, does it? Does it still relate to us? And specifically, these little stories, like in Luke, where a couple of Jesus' disciples decide to take off from Jerusalem to go to Emmaus, and they're walking, right? So, of what real impact could that have on you and I today? Well, they took their own Emmaus Walk, and the Emmaus Walk is the title for my message, and it's about how scriptures are actually meant to not only bring us peace of mind, but to encourage us and to give us a sense of hope, and also to help us to understand or be guided in a way that when we have choices, especially difficult ones that come out of difficult circumstances, we have a sense of what would be a choice that really helps us, that really moves us and helps our spiritual experience and our being. And so this morning, I hope you'll join me with some new understandings, because I read this story. It's called the story of the road to Emmaus. All right, and excuse me. And the thing is, when I read it this time, something really came out much different for me than has ever happened in the past. And I'm hoping you can get that same sense, because as I share with you this morning, I just am so excited about it, because when you get these new insights, you just want somebody else to know, right?
Right.
All right, so let's take this understanding, this new revelation that I've had, and let's begin. Now, there's something about when people read the Bible to me, right? I just love it, and I hope you do too, because I'm going to be sharing a bit of this story, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And you can take this story and you can have it just be a good story, or think of it possibly as a love letter, a lesson if you need to, or even just plain old good advice, all right? Now, a love letter? Anybody ever thought of it that way? And yet it is, because what it is it's a story, a letter of Jesus' such powerful love that he came back into this form for the people that mattered to him, that loved him, that were followers of his. And this is that story. And so I invite you to allow the Holy Spirit as interpreter to open and make you receptive to what it is that Spirit is offering us this day. So after Jesus' death, we understand that everyone just had to take a rest. I mean, it was the Sabbath. They had to take a rest. And to me, that's really indicative that when these big ordeals come into our life, that we really need to take time to regroup. We just need to be able to find that place within us in which we just get to a sense of peace. And when we've had a lot of grief and when our minds are blank, they're numb, our feelings are off the chart, we need some space from everything and anything. And so I think that this story is telling us that this is a good thing to do. And the women, some of them are followers of, some of these women that are followers of Jesus, go to the tomb. And they're met by these two dazzling men. Now, those of us who have not had an opportunity to see angels, we can only surmise that they would be really dazzling. So, use your imagination. But these angels ask the women, why, and this is a very important question, why do you seek the living among the dead? Because when they looked in the tomb, there was no one there. So it's important to think about that question. I'm going to pause us for a moment, because it's symbolic to me of the things that you and I do, we look for the living among the dead. And what I mean by that is we do our prayer for our miracles. We do our affirmations. We even get prayer support. And we go looking for what? Do we look for our prayer to be answered, truly? Or are we looking for the opposite? When we're after we've done our prayer work and we've done all this work, what is our expectation? Is it going to be fulfilled? Are we really looking and saying yes? And we're seeing it and knowing it in our hearts. And that's kind of what this story is talking about. It's like when we go looking for the living among the dead. All right? In other words, when we look for the miracles in our life, when we are asked for these prayer requests and stuff, we're not going to find them in the tomb. We're not going to find them in that tomb. Oh, most of us kind of hope that it'll happen, but belief is really important. And there's a means with which you and I can kind of help us facilitate our faith and belief. And that's through the rest of this story. So as we used to hear from PCR, our public radio, and now for the rest of the story. All right, so now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told this to the apostles. Now, the apostles, they've gone back after seeing the empty tomb, and they told them all about what had happened. And so you're seeing these women that are rushing back, and they're trying to tell them, because these dazzling men, these angels, have told these women, Jesus has risen from the dead. Go and tell the other disciples. So they, sure enough, they go do that, right? And what happens? But these words seemed to them, these men, an idle tale. And they did not believe them. That very day, 2 of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. How many times in our lives have we had an experience, right, where we needed to trust our feelings, our intuition, our gut, and we poo-pot it? We go, oh, I don't really know. I really don't really know, so I can't trust myself. Whatever's going on, right? And we realized later on that had we just listened to that gut feeling or that instinct or that intuition or whatever was going on with us, we would have had a much quicker resolution and a much easier experience. Have you ever had that in your life? I've done it more than once. I've done it. I can tell you. I can only admit to it. And so here you have these guys. 2 of them are like, these women. Now the women represent the feeling nature. The men represent the intellectual aspect. And sometimes within us, the intellect has a problem with our feelings and being able to connect to that. So, your song this morning about in between places and letting go of that logic and walking in, I mean, it's perfect. It is just absolutely perfect. Because this is what I am speaking of. It is letting that need, if you will, for things to make sense first, just let it sit aside for a moment until you can connect with letting spirit and the feeling nature bring you a sense of truth and what you need to know. Because it'll happen much quicker and easier than through our mind trying to reason and figure everything out and make some logic. Not that the mind isn't meant to do those things, it's just that there is an integration that needs to occur. And that's what, to me, this story is talking about, is how this integration is so important. And so what we have is we have these 2 guys who are disciples of Jesus. one of them, talking to the other as they're going to Emmaus. They're having their own Emmaus walk. And Jesus said to them, "What is this conversation which you are holding with each other as you walk?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Now, Cleopas is Greek, and it means father of praise, and glorious father, renowned father. Cleopas was a follower of Jesus, but he was one that took on the ideas of the external. Jesus was going to take and become the king and those kind of things, and he was going to be one of these people that does it on the exterior rather than from the spiritual. And so he held that kind of a mindset. Cleopas represents that place in your mind and my mind where we've heard the truth, but how many buts can we come up with? And he's had a lot of buts. It's like, but I want him to do it this way. I want it to look like this. I need it to be this. How many ways do we look to have something true, the truth, try to be different than what it is? Because it doesn't fit in something that we're needing in that moment or think we need in that moment, right? So this mindset is what he is. He hasn't owned what Jesus was saying. He hasn't come to that place where he sees that he's a part of this process, and his belief is not about something on the external. It needs to be about something on the internal, and a change and a shift for him. So so in this point, and he said to them, okay, so he's there and he's talking with them, and they've explained to him all about the women and all about the different things that these women have told them, and they just said, this is... And Jesus' response, he said to them, "Oh, foolish men, slow of heart to believe and all the prophets spoken? Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Now, for many years in my life, I read that as kind of a predestination. This is like prophesying, was a predestination. Jesus had no choice. There was nothing that was going to happen that didn't happen or wasn't supposed to happen that was going to happen. There was no choice. But this passage, after reading this today, or for this message, something different changed for me. And it's a message of a promise. It's a message about the promise of the hope of something as powerful as the Christ, which can overcome death itself. Something that would come in and create a space in which sin and forgiveness cannot and do not hold us hostage any longer. And to me, that place in us is so powerful, that sense of hope, that it just simply rules out all the extraneous stuff when we have that, the lack of belief or the lack of faith in those the things that we're asking for and we're praying for. And I don't know about you, but there are so many times in my life where I get these God bumps, where you just know Spirit has just tread across your heart, or something has happened and you're meant to take notice. You get these feelings, or you have your answered prayer, and you just have this sense of something big has just changed in my life. Or even as they said in the scripture here, that their hearts burned within them, right? Their hearts burned within them. So this passage is so powerful because it brings to the second time in this story where the disciples are being told about the Christ and that there was a purpose. And don't you remember Jesus telling you that he was going to come back and that this is what is occurring? And so they heard it, and all of a sudden these guys are like, whoa, and they recognize Jesus. And so he's beginning with Moses and all the prophets. He interpreted to them all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. And when he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 gathered together and those who were with them, who said, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Okay, well, so one of the other disciples has also seen Jesus. And so they are confirming, and they're like, it's, oh my gosh, And so they're all excited, and they go back to Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem means habitation of peace. This is so important. They return from that Emmaus Walk into Jerusalem, that habitation of peace, that consciousness of peace. And that's where all of the disciples are at this time. Now, sometimes it takes the blessing of the bread. It takes that recognizing these scriptures, reading them, the wisdom in them, and getting them and eating them. In other words, taking them in and really absorbing them in order for you and I to really experience that sense and see the Christ not only in ourselves and around us, but in all of the experiences that we have. And so Cleopas, his name meant renowned father. He came to that place where he finally took it in. Oh, it's not about Jesus coming and saving us by doing something and becoming a king. It's about him coming and creating forgiveness and creating a space where sin no longer holds us hostage. And I am able to be a part of giving that and experiencing that and taking it in. So that God within him becomes that renowned father of his own, in which he recognizes that all the good he needs is at hand. So it takes a few minutes for them to realize that they have been on their own Emmaus Walk, right? And their spiritual insights started to work at last. Only when Jesus shows up with all the other disciples now, they're all there together, voila! Jesus is standing there. They think they see a spirit. Oh my gosh, he has to tell them one more time. I told you, you didn't listen? I mean, come on. I really, really, really meant it. I'm back. Here, give me something to eat. Because they thought he was a spirit. And so he takes and he shows them, who he is, all of his wounds, and he eats something, and they're like, oh my God, it's real. He's there.
He's not coming out.
All right. And so I think about it, and I recognize, he said to them, "These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." Must be fulfilled is about this promise of spirit. It's a promise of God that always be there, and that Christ will come and is our salvation. And that is the promise that we can hold on to. And he opened their minds to understand the scriptures and said to them, "Thus it is written that the Christ should suffer and on the third day rise from the dead, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins should be preached in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem." Can you get the significance of that? Beginning from Jerusalem is where you and I find the capacity to forgive. You and I find the capacity, that peace. When we have that peace of mind and of being, that's when you and I have that consciousness in which we can do the things we need to do from a spiritual standpoint that help us move. The promise of God is peace. He said, "Behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you, but stay in the city of peace until you are clothed with power on high." He was telling them, you're not quite there yet in your own, you're not quite where you can just do all your own healings. You're not quite where you really know God's presence just simply at the touch. You're not quite there. Stay in Jerusalem until you can. And so he's talking about, don't make any of these choices. Don't be doing and running off and trying to fix things and trying to do stuff until you are in a state of peace. You know, the peace of God is like trying to catch a wave in a child's sand bucket. I don't know about you, but you can't get a whole lot. But here's the thing. You and I can stand with our toes in the sand and let the waves wash over us. We can hear the birds calling and we can feel the breeze on us. And in that moment, you and I can get a sense of that peace that is God, that is so powerful. And I may not be able to get all of it, but I get it enough to know that it's there and it's there in abundance. Have you ever had that experience where you just need to feel some peace and you just need to get away? Maybe you go to the beach and you can feel it and you just get enough. You get just enough. But you know, you can feel how powerful peace is, and it's there. And I think Jesus was telling them too that when he's sending them out, because he does send them out, he's saying, in order for you to have forgiveness, in order for you to let go of sin, or letting go of, and sin being missing the mark, right? We have to be centered. We have to get ourselves in a place of peace. And he's saying that that's a big hint for us, by the way, is whenever we need to do that, anything, get into a state of peace first. So he led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. And while he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple blessing God. Okay. Now, Bethany is the Greek word, and it means house of distress. But it comes out of the Hebrew, which means Beth-Bera. And it stands for a place of crossings, or a crossroads, or a place of fords, or where crossings are made. So in effect, when you and I have these distressful times, when we're in that place in which we are experiencing affliction or distress or depression or any of those other things, essentially we are at a crossroads. We need to remember that the Christ is there blessing us. We need to remember that place and be reminded we have to go back to Jerusalem, because that's what he tells them. He blesses them right there where they are. They're standing at that crossroads having to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to become, because he's not going to be there leading them anymore. It's their work. It's their energy of love to give. It's their compassion. It's their healing power to give, and their message to share. And so these scriptures to me are telling us the most powerful thing of all. And I want to share, this is the denouement. Don't forget, let's get to it. They got the encouragement they needed. And you and I need that encouragement in our lives. We need that sense of hope. When we have had and are experiencing, many of us do, all the time, a hard journey, especially those of us who are aging. We just have to be willing to understand that there is an exercise, there is a powerful thing that you and I can do, and that's our own Emmaus Walk. In order to get into a state of peace, take a paper, pen, take a recorder, whatever you need, and just go out and be open for whatever signs you need in this moment, and walk. And just notice whatever you need to notice, that Christ is with you, to bring you to that place. Physically make you feel that connection, that Christ is with you. Your Emmaus Walk may not look like this one. There's a lady who decided to take her on Emmaus Walk. And as she was walking in the woods, she came to a fork. Just a plain old utensil sitting there in the middle of leaves and branches and everything else. Her Emmaus Walk, she realized she was at a fork in the road, in their path. I didn't even realize it until she opened to that. And then she made the rest of that walk about what messages she needed to have in order to take this walk and to move forward from there with the tools that she needed and knowing that Christ was with her. So try this. Let the Bible become relevant to you. Take your Emmaus Walk. It may not be as obvious as hers was. Write down everything you discover. And you can even do it with two people. Go out and see whatever it is that comes forward. Just know that if you and I are willing to open our eyes and our hearts and our minds, I believe that the next steps you take will be one with Christ. God bless you in peace.